Alright, this is the world's ugliest shovelhead part 2. Compare this thing to what I started with in part 1. You already see there's a big difference. It's got to be the ugliest shovelhead I've seen in a long time. In part 2, I'm going to get the wheels on the bike. I'm going to show you how I bleed the back brake by myself without anybody to help me. Pretty neat little method, little trick I've used over the years. And I'm going to show you how I age this paint. If you like what you see, subscribe, leave a comment for me below. If you're interested in merch, information on my Sons of Speed Vintage Racing, or anything else, always click the link below, www.billylane.net. There's always good stuff on there for you. Thanks for watching. This is my favorite part. I'm going to fix the rear brake on this. Before I do that, I'm going to put the front wheel on just to get it stable on the rack here so it's not sitting on these two jack stands. It doesn't get knocked off by accident. I've had it happen before. But I'm going to get the front wheel on it. I'll do the rear brake, get the rear wheel on it. This thing's going to start looking like a motorcycle. I'm going to go ahead and reinstall this rear brake, hook the brake line up and hook the foot control up on this right side of the bike and see how the wheel cylinder works on this. If the wheel cylinder works, I'm going to leave it. If it needs to be rebuilt or replaced, I'm going to do those things. So I'm going to go ahead and get this back in here and get it mounted up and get the brake line installed. Find out what we got. In order to get this rear brake set up, I got to get the front foot control and the master cylinder on. I don't know if you remember the master cylinder that came on it was really roached out. I'm going to put a new master cylinder on it, put this foot control back on it, get the line hooked up and get some fluid through it, and I'm going to push fluid from the front to the back. I've already flushed the line out and blown it out, but I'm going to push good clean fluid all the way through to the rear to make sure that the only thing in the line is new clean .3 brake fluid. I'll line this whole rig up for a second while I tighten the rear. That way I line everything up. I'll tighten this back bolt up. Now this one should go back in and out pretty easy. There's a thick spacer that goes on here to compensate for the thickness of that travel stop. That goes on like that. This one goes in like that. And this is the footboard mount here. I'm just going to go ahead and set this on loose until I get the footboards on and get this whole system working. I'm going to go ahead and grease. Everything was so dry on this bike from sitting for so long. I'll put all this on loose right now, just until I get this brake all bled and everything set up on it. Install the brake line. So hard as it is to believe, my rear wheel cylinder had been replaced by an Excel unit probably in the mid 90s when they had this bike apart, and it's super clean inside, works fine, and is in great shape. So I'm going to go ahead and run it like this. So I'm ready to connect the brake line and bleed it. So I'm going to put the drum on. Now to give my shoes something to pressurize against. Now I'm going to show you my trick for bleeding brakes when you're by yourself. I've got fluid in the line. I go ahead and pump my brake a few times like you normally would when you're bleeding brakes. And move the fluid down. I'm starting to get a little resistance in the line now as it's compressing. Take a heavy rubber bungee cord that I have, and I strap the bungee cord to my motorcycle lift. That keeps my pedal depressed. Now the pedal is depressed, I can go bleed on the other side. I got a bleeder screw here. I'm just going to hold my rag over the bleeder screw as I bleed so that fluid doesn't shoot out all over my shop. See that though? There's your pressure in the line because I have the bungee cord holding the pedal down. That's how I do it, real simple. You see clear, clean purple fluids coming out. That's what I put in the front. That's a good sign. There's no dirt, anything in the line or in the wheel cylinder. And you can see I can't turn the drum because the brake is locked. As soon as I release the pressure, now the drum will turn because the brake pressure is off. And I'm going to come back again and just bleed one more time, make sure I don't get any air out of it. Steady solid fluid. I'll go back and check all my other fittings in the line and make sure everything is dry, that there's no leaks, and if there is no leaks, then I'm ready to move on. There's my method with the bungee cord. Pump. And usually give it 3 good pumps. Then tie the bungee cord down. And the bungee cord is just like your foot on a pedal, pressing down, keeping the pressure on the master cylinder until you release the pressure at the wheel cylinder. I know the business with the rear brake is done. I can go ahead and get the rear wheel back in it and kind of get this thing down on its tires and get a really good feel for what it's going to look like. I always like to look at a bike a lot. I've told you this before. When I'm working on something, it gives me ideas of little details and things I need to do. I'm very visual when it comes to my work. This is all mechanical work right now, but still there's little things I'm going to do to this bike that are going to be visual, so I want to make sure that I got all my bases covered. I'm going to get this wheel in. Sometimes you gotta let the air out of the tire. Alright, the wheels bolted to the drum with those 5 lug bolts I removed earlier. Means I'm ready for the axle spacer. Okay, besides just flat lighting the thing on fire, there's another thing I do to age this paint. And you just do it in various spots. You don't have to do it all over, but I used used motor oil. I dip a rag in it, and I'll take that oil and I'll put it on certain spots of the bike. Not the whole thing. I'll wipe it on different various spots. Then I use my oxygen acetylene torch. I use this oxygen acetylene torch, but I'm only using acetylene. I'm not using the oxygen. I don't really need it. And I get it kind of hot. If I put the oxygen in, it makes it too hot. And I just go around and I cook some of that oil into the paint. It doesn't take a lot. Too much heat will burn the paint off. But the flame heats the oil, opens the pores of the paint, and the used motor oil, all the carbon that's in it, actually gets into the pores of the paint. Just in some spots. If you do too long or too close or too steady in one spot, it's going to burn the paint. That's good, but you don't want too much. But just a little bit. And then it's going to be hot. I come in and I wipe the excess oil off and all that carbon off. You kind of start to see, it doesn't look like something I just spray painted a couple days ago. The heat, the oil, the gasoline all start to really do its thing to the paint. When all this is done, the world's ugliest shovelhead will start to look a little bit better. Alright, so tools of the trade. I use a big drift punch, heavy. We'll see why. Piece of steel wool. A little strip of emery cloth, basically designate grit, emery cloth. Piece of Scotch Brite pad. I usually cut this into small patches. And a buck knife. Wow, this is a buck knife. It worked good. So let me show you how I age this paint. I'll put my glasses on because I can't see up close too well without them anymore. When it comes to aging paint, I showed you what I do with the fire and the fuel and the oil and the carbon from the acetylene torch. That's a big part of it. A lot of it is to just kind of aging the paint in spots where the bike would typically have wear. You know, for example, they always age under the seat here because these seats come down and pound here, and usually you get a lot of aging underneath the bottom of the tank because you get backfire blowback from the carburetor and hot oil coming up from the bottom side of the. Gotta watch out what's going on outside. They had shooting out here the other night. So you just kind of try and pick your spots. You don't want to do too much. It's real easy to overdo it. Like the way this looks now, it's way worse than it's going to be when I'm done with it. So I usually take my buck knife and I'm just going to start, like I'll pick a spot where I want to scrape the paint. And you know, there's a couple low spots here. So I'm going to scrape the paint off those low spots and go to the coating that's underneath. And these tanks, I don't even remember, but this tank was pretty rusty on the surface when it was done, and it had some spots of paint, other spots where there wasn't paint. That's actually really nice for me, because I can get under here now and get back down into that legit rust that's, you know, probably 50, 60 years old. These tanks are from 1959, 1960. The badges are actually old badges that have a lot of age on them already. So I don't have to do that, but I'll just come in and I'll scrape and I find spots that I need to completely wear the paint up through, especially around the gas cap. You always get wear around the gas cap, and then I use steel wool, like for example, to streak out past the gas cap, because that's what gasoline would do. Gasoline will streak through there. I get a lot of this carbon burn off of this tank, and there's oil on the tank now from when I oiled it. Some of it burned into the paint, some of it's just on the surface. So that oil actually will rub into the paint too. Actually helps part of the aging. But it's like real rust that was there for God knows how long. And I scraped some of this gold off in a few spots and get that to come through, and just, sometimes that real age is underneath there, when I bring it out. But it makes it, that dent's real, that ding is real. I try to sand as little as possible with sandpaper or emery cloth. That's how most people age stuff, and it's the kind of the cheap and easy way to do it. The steel wool is a lot more subtle. I'm going to go ahead and work on this fender, and you can see this, I burned through a little bit of it on purpose. There's a couple spots, but you always get a little bit of wear right on the edge of this body line on the fender. So I'm going to scrape some of that paint through to the dark paint that's underneath of it. Just a few spots, and just a hair, don't need a lot. Some areas heavier than others. There's always a lot of chipping around the hinge here on the fender. The paint chips. So I'm going to scratch a lot in there. And anything I do with the knife, I'll go back and smooth over with the steel wool. All this texture on this rear fender, this is from me burning through on purpose. Gives it a really kind of a cool thing. I can go back in other spots if I want to burn through. I can use a small butane torch I have, or I can bust out the big oxygen acetylene torch. But either way, the oil and the steel wool, it really helps age this thing. Always on the rivets, the high spots on the rivets, you're going to get wear. The edges of them sometimes. And then we're going to chip that off. You can sand it off, but those high spots almost always get hit. But that's how I do it. It's not complicated. It takes experience and practice to get better and better at it. I know I'm not the best at it. There's people that do it way better than me. So, and I'm not claiming to show you the right way to do it. I'm just showing you the way I do it. My way, is pretty good. And what will happen is, as I ride the bike, a lot of people ride their bike on the weekend, and then when they're done, they polish it. I'll do the opposite. I'll ride this, and as I'm riding it, I'll see spots that need detail, that need attention, that don't look right. Through the course of riding this, it will age itself. It'll be out in the sun. It'll have things dropped on it. People are going to, someone's going to sit on the back fender. Things are going to happen to it. So it will get its own natural aging, but I'll look around it as I go, and instead of polishing it on the weekends, I'll spend an hour here or there working on getting the aging really, really good. And I look at stuff that I know has been aged by people intentionally, and look at what they do, and like, oh, okay, that's what I need to do on mine. So I'm getting better at it. I'm not an expert at it. I'm just trying to show you how I do it. And you can see it's a pretty damn good look. Better than what I had. Here's what I did on the back fender. All the same on the front fender. I'm gonna take my punch and just knock it, nick it. Gives me scratches. It's heavy. There you get a pretty good feel for what I'm going for on this thing. I'll work on it some more, but I wanted to give you guys a good look at how I do this, how you get that look. It's nighttime, so the lights on my ceiling are kind of making it hard to see. I'll take it out in the morning in some natural daylight, let you see how it looks. It looks pretty genuine the way it's done. I'll work on it some more and get it where I'm really happy with it. Ready for the World's Ugliest Shovelhead Part 3 coming soon. I'm going to finish the motorcycle, get it running, and take it for a pretty epic ride that I think you're going to love.